21-day lockdown across the nation. And ever since that lockdown was announced, one of the deepest fears was what would be the implications for India's labor market. Now, India, unlike other nations, doesn't have high-frequency official data on unemployment, but the CMIE does put out an unemployment rate indicator, and that indicator is showing a spike to above 23% in the last week of March and the first week of April, with the caveat that the sample size used for that rate being computed is smaller than in normal times. Joining us to help us understand the data better is Mr. Mahesh Vyas, MD and CEO of CMIE. So thanks so much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. I'm going to just first ask you to explain the data that you put out on your website this morning and the indicators coming through from it, sir.
So, because of the lockdown, we had to pull back our field operations, and the numbers that we collect for the unemployment is usually done by door-to-door canvassing of a questionnaire. That operation had to be pulled out. But we quickly reorganized ourselves and started the survey telephonically, and have been able to bring out numbers which are reasonably reliable. So just to give you an idea, we usually get of the order of 25,000 observations per week to calculate the unemployment rate. 25,000 is the rough number we get per week. This number is very large from a sampling which well across the country, urban and rural. Now, when the lockdown happened and the survey operations kind of stopped, we in that week got observations only for around 2,300 observations. And we saw that the unemployment rate from that was about 23% or so, but we said the sample is so small that we would rather not use this, and we did not release that number out. But the following week, the telephonic interviews did progress and progressed quite well. And the observations we got for the week ended 4th of March was of the order of 9,500. And a bigger sample, 9,500 compared to the normal 25,000, again, well representing India, urban and rural, again gave us a number of 23%. Now, this looks a lot more credible. And this is not surprising that if you have an estimate which is almost like a binary, are you employed or unemployed, then a sample size of the order of 10,000 is definitely a reliable sample, and it turns out that even a 2,200 or 2,300 sample was good enough. So therefore, after taking due care that a larger sample gave the same result as the earlier one did, we released these numbers out. We have reasonable confidence that the unemployment has gone up and it's likely to be in the range of 23%.
Mr. Vyas, a couple of follow-up questions, partly on the methodology and also then the insight that you get from it. So the set of people or the sample of people you would have, or your team would have called for this would be split between rural and urban, you said, but would they broadly fall in the category of daily wage earners, would you say?
Yes. It includes daily wage earners. It includes self-employed people besides the salaried people. It includes agricultural laborers. So it covers the entire spectrum. But I should tell you what the caveat over here is. And that caveat is not a very good piece of news in terms of the state of the economy. Our sample underrepresents the migrant workers. So while we do cover daily wage earners, we do cover self-employed people. We cover those people who are selling bananas down the street or who are standing at the curb to be hired as carpenters or masons. We also cover agricultural laborers and so on and so forth. But what we are underrepresenting is the migrant workers, because the migrant workers often live on construction sites. And they do not fall in our panel, which are necessarily households, even if they are in the slum. But a settlement which is extremely temporary, say in constructing a road or a construction site otherwise, is seriously underrepresented. And now we know from all the media reports that the stress is very high in migrant labor. So the unemployment rate could very well be higher than 23% if you account for that.
Okay. So then, sir, this particular data point is consistent with what everyone had feared right at the start of these lockdowns, which is that the informal economy will take a significant hit. You will probably not be able to compensate the daily wage earners for their income loss simply by the relatively small package that has been announced by the government.
I agree. The package announced is too small to offset the loss. The loss over here is very high. We did get shocked looking at the numbers, but we studied the numbers and the sample very carefully to see which kind of people were employed earlier are unemployed now, and it doesn't look very good at all.
Okay. So at what point do you think we will be able to capture better what is happening, for instance, in the construction sector, but also some of the industries like, say, auto ancillaries, etc., where there are a large number of contract workers, they may not be daily wagers as such. Would that have already gotten captured in the 2-week data that you have, or would that come a little down the line?
Yes, contractual labor is covered. Mind you, even construction labor is covered. See, the caveat I was referring to is only with respect to migrant labor. So if there is labor that is moving in and out of places, then we are not able to capture their behavior very well. But we have a fairly large representation of people working in the construction industry, people working as daily wage earners. Contractual labor is no problem at all, because the only thing about them is they don't get employed directly by the companies for which they work, but they are getting employed through a contractor. Those are fully covered by us. I don't think there is anything missing over there. The representation of the informal sector, formal sector, organized, unorganized sector, everything is covered. The only thing which is not covered adequately is migrant labor. Adequately meaning if the migrant labor is living in a clear household, it will get counted in our sample. It will get counted in finding out what is the behavior of people in those households. It is only those people who are very, very mobile, they are here today and there tomorrow, are the people that we are not able to track.
Okay, understood. So, and Narega workers would also get captured, sir, since there are reports across many states that Narega works have stopped?
Oh, Narega is captured 100%. I mean, it's fully adequately covered by us.
Okay. Sir, if I can just step back from just the data, but also ask you for your impression. So, we've seen your indicator show a spike in unemployment rate in these segments, but we have also seen sporadic reports of, slightly larger corporations asking some people to go on leave without pay, etc. What is your broader sense of how this period will play out on the labor market, sir?
And at this moment, we can only talk about that in an anecdotal sense. And initially, companies were very generous in trying to accommodate labor in these situations by saying that people should be able to work from home, or they will not cut salaries. I think the corporate sector came out quite well initially. But slowly, as the stress in the economy is quite high, companies are not able to live up to that, and there is uncertainty. That is the problem, the uncertainty over how long will this lockdown or these restrictions last. So maybe the corporate sector or enterprise at large will be able to compensate labor for some time, but I don't think they will be able to do it for long. And I think that it is important for the government to come out and take steps to ensure that labor does not get too stressed, because the long-term impact of stressed labor is going to be a lot more damaging than the immediate impact.
100%. What, to your mind, are some of the measures that can and should be taken, both for sort of the immediate problem, which a lot of people have said is the daily wage earners, but also from some of the other labor segments that we were talking about just in the last question?
I don't have any specific suggestion. I'm not a policy prescription person either. I'm just speaking from the observations that I see, that the disruptions are quite large and markets are not going to solve this problem by themselves. It requires government intervention. It requires specialists who can advise the government what kind of measures the government can take to repose faith in entrepreneurs as well as in labor that it will put money on the table to bail us out.
Fair enough, Mr. Vyas. Let me then ask you from your experience of studying industry for years and looking at data for years. The question is being asked. Okay, so you have a 21-day lockdown. Maybe after that you have some sort of a staggered opening up. How quickly do you think sort of manufacturing processes, etc., start to pick up so that some of this labor then starts to get absorbed and the unemployment rate would start to come down? How quick is that process to your mind?
Well, before we answer that question, which I think is a very important question, I'd like to place this question in perspective. So what we have been seeing, and I'm drawing upon you saying that we have been monitoring the economy for a long time, and I'm drawing exactly on that, is that 2019-20 has been one of the worst years that I've seen for maybe 20 years. The reason why I say that is if I look at the quarterly financial statements of listed companies, which is not a bad representation of non-government, non-agricultural sectors in India, what I find over there is in each of the last 3 quarters, inflation at the top line was year-on-year decline. So I call this a recession. But then we did this calculation in a slightly better way by computing the adjusted gross value added of the listed corporate sector, and we found this to be a bigger fall. So the adjusted of the listed non-finance companies for each of the 3 quarters before we were hit by the lockdown was negative. And this is the worst that I have seen in maybe since the quarterly results started coming out. So we are hitting COVID-19 at a time when we are in the worst possible position. So it's going to get really very bad. Now, if the corporate sector was doing so badly, pardon me when I say this, but if the corporate honcho is thinking rationally, he's saying that the situation is so bad, now I have an excuse to say I'm winding down. Winding down on labor will be a starting point. So I think the return to normalcy is going to be many-fold difficult. It is not only a lockdown problem, but it is a problem which is compounding of a sustained real decline in the economy, followed by a COVID-19 hit, which is the lockdown hit.
You make a very important point, Mr. Vyas. And if I could just, sort of take a little bit of a leap into another data point that you compile, things like new projects, etc. I think any hope that anyone had of a pickup in the investment cycle, which anyway, even before COVID had gotten completely dampened since we were running at capacity utilization levels at about 68% going by the RBI data, surely all of that gets now further pushed back until we can at least move back to, say, January levels of economic activity, which were, as you pointed out, hardly in the pink of health. So an expectation or a wait for pickup in the investment cycle, etc., is way down the line now.
That's right. So the challenges we face are really daunting. And in such situations, to assume that markets will fix this would not be the most advisable strategy. Although I will say I do not know what needs to be done, but one thing is for sure, it requires the government to step in huge consultation with industry, with everybody else, all stakeholders.
All right, Mr. Vyas, I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much. Very kind of you to take the time to explain your data point. A very critical data point, given that we don't have official labor market indicators. The CMIE unemployment rate showing a spike to 23%. Thanks so much for watching BloombergQuint. You'll be able to read the transcript of that interview on the website soon.
The union to secure your future is here.